σιγά σιγά να ξεκινήσουμε. Στόχος μας, θα ακούσουμε 3 ακόμη παρουσιάσεις από τους ξένους εμπειρογνώμονες μας στην αγγλική γλώσσα. Και πιστεύω ότι θα ολοκληρώσουμε γύρω στις 1 και μετά τις 1 θα υπάρχει μια μικρή δεξίωση εδώ στον χώρο μας να παραμείνετε. Πριν την αναχώρησή σας, θα χαρούμε να σας έχουμε ακόμα λίγο χρόνο κοντά μας, πέραν των διαφόρων ομιλίας και ερωτήματα που θα απαντηθούν στον χώρο μας εδώ. Μπορείτε να είστε να περάσετε στην κατίνα μας για να πάρετε κάτι. Όπως βλέπετε εδώ υπάρχει μια πράσινη μασκότα, σας συστήσα πριν και απολογούμε. Αυτή η όμορφη μασκότα ονομάζεται Πέστη. Ωραία. Είναι η μασκότα της Ευρωπαϊκής Αρχής Ασφάλειας Τροφίμων. Είναι η μασκότα που χρησιμοποιείται για να ευαισθητοποιήσει το κοινό, το ευρύτερο κοινό, στα θέματα της υγείας των φυτών και να αναδείξει τη σημασία της υγείας των φυτών. Αν ακούσετε από τον κύριο Γενικό, η Διεθνής ημέρα υγείας των φυτών ξεκινά σε όλα τα κράτη-μέλη στις 12 του Μάη. Εμάς ξεκινούμε με τη σημερινή μας ημερίδα. Ωραία, γιατί αυτά που κάνουμε, οι εργασίες που κάνουμε έχουν αυτόν ακριβώς το στόχο, να ευαισθητοποιήσουμε τον κόσμο για την παρουσία επιβλαβών οργανισμών και να ευαισθητοποιήσουμε τον κόσμο να αποφεύγει τα μηνύματα του τμήματος γεωργίας, είναι να αποφεύγουν να φέρνουν μαζί τους στις βαλίτσες οποιουσδήποτε σπόρους, καρπούς, φυτά, μοσχεύματα, γιατί αυτά, αν και φαινοτυπικά φαίνονται καθαρά σε εσάς, στην πραγματικότητα δεν είναι. Είναι φορτωμένα αρρώστιες. Και το ηλεκτρονικό εμπόριο, δυστυχώς, είναι ακόμη ένα κανάλι το οποίο ο κόσμος ανεξέλεκτα αγοράζει φυτά και φυτικά προϊόντα και θέλουμε μέσω της εκστρατείας μας αυτής να ευαισθητοποιήσουμε το κοινό να αποφεύγει αυτές τις πράξεις. Αν είχετε δει μαζί μας, έχουν και έξω, να πάρετε σας παρακαλώ, έχουμε μια μικρή αφίσα, ένα λεπτό να βάλω. Έχουμε δημιουργήσει μια μικρή αφίσα που θα ήθελαμε να πάρετε μαζί σας. Θα υπάρχει, για να ξέρετε, το τμήμα γεωργίας τι κάνει, θα υπάρχουν διάφορα προγράμματα στην τηλεόραση, στο ραδιόφωνο, αρθογραφίες για το θέμα αυτό και θα προσπαθούμε να είμαστε και σε διάφορες εκδηλώσεις παγκύπρια για να αναδείξουμε αυτό το θέμα και πάλι. Στα αεροδρόμια Λάρνακας και Πάφου θα υπάρχει οπτικοακουστικό υλικό βίντεο τους μήνες Ιούλιο και Αύγουστο για να επισημάνει αυτό στους ταξιδιώτες μας, κυρίως στους Κυπρίους που φεύγουν και επιστρέφουν πίσω για να μην φέρουν κάτι μαζί τους. Και το τμήμα Γεωργίας έχει προχωρήσει στην εκτύπωση ενός βιβλιαρίου και παρακαλώ πιάστε 1, πιάστε 2, πιάστε 3, δώστε τα στα παιδιά σας, στα εγγόνια σας. Είναι ένα βιβλίο που αγγίζει μέχρι Δευτέρα, Τρίτη Δημοτικού. Είναι μια πολύ ωραία ιστορία μέσα και υπάρχει χώρος για να ζωγραφίσουν τα μικρά παιδιά και μέσω της ιστορίας να αντιληφθούν, να μην φέρνουν από τα ταξίδια τους ή από οπουδήποτε αλλού ξένους επιβλαβείς οργανισμούς. Η εκστρατεία της Ευρώπης στηρίζεται και στοχεύει στην ευαισθητοποίηση του κοινού, ώστε να μην φέρνουν όταν πάνε σε τρίτες χώρες εκτός της Ευρώπης φυτά και φυτικά προϊόντα. Εμείς ως νησί που είμαστε, ακόμα, ασχέτως με τη διαφορά, η τώρα δεν είναι καλό παράδειγμα, είμαστε απαλλαγμένοι από άλλους αρκετούς οργανισμούς και εχθρούς και ασθένειες που ενδεχομένως να υπάρχουν και στα κράτη-μέλη. Γι' αυτό για μας, σαν τμήμα γεωργίας, μην θεωρείτε τα άλλα κράτη-μέλη ασφαλή πάλι για να φέρνετε τα φυτά σας και τα φυτικά προϊόντα. Βασικά δεν θέλουμε να φέρνετε από πουθενά ανεξέλεκτα. Εντάξει, αν θέλετε και επιθυμείτε να φέρετε κάτι, μπορείτε να το κάνετε εφόσον αυτά συνοδεύονται με τις απαραίτητες βεβαιώσεις, τα φυτογειονομικά διαβατήρια από κράτη-μέλη και τα φυτογειονομικά πιστοποιητικά από τρίτες χώρες. Ωραία, να δώσω. Ναι. Περίμενε.
Παρακαλώ.
Μπράβο.
Ωραία. Ενδιαφέρον αυτά που ακούμε, ναι. Λέγεται να μην εισαγούνται, να μην γίνεται εισαγωγή ανθέων φυτών για τους κήπους, ατομικά. Μπορείτε να μας σχολιάσετε τότε τις εισαγωγές από διάφορα φυτόρια αναφορικά με άνθεα και φυτά που φέρνουν.
Βεβαίως.
Στην Κύπρο.
Βεβαίως. Οι εισαγωγείς, είτε είναι έμποροι που φέρνουν από άλλα κράτη-μέλη, είτε που φέρνουν από τρίτες χώρες, είναι γραμμένοι σε ένα συγκεκριμένο μητρό του τμήματος γεωργίας και είναι εγκεκριμένοι για τον σκοπό αυτόν. Είναι ενήμεροι επί των διαδικασιών μας και τα εμπορεύματα τους τυχάνουν των απαραίτητων φυτογειονομικών ελέγχων προτού μπουν στην Κύπρο. Εάν τα φυτά τους αυτά που φέρνουν δεν έχουν τα απαραίτητα έγγραφα, τους αρνείται η είσοδος στη δημοκρατία. Που σας είχα μιλήσει πριν λίγο για τα διαβατήρια ή τα φυτογειονομικά πιστοποιητικά. Και η ελέγχη μας, ιδίως να γνωρίζετε στις τρίτες χώρες, φορτία που έρχονται από τρίτες χώρες, είναι καθολική. Είναι σχολαστική και καθολική. Δηλαδή, κάθε φορτίο που έρχεται στην Κύπρο μας τη χάνει των απαραίτητων ελέγχων. Γι' αυτό και η εκστρατεία μας επικεντρώνεται στο κοινό. Το κοινό δεν γνωρίζει τις διαδικασίες που πρέπει να τηρεί. Έχοντας τους επαγγελματίες μας γραμμένους σε συγκεκριμένα μητρώα, σημαίνει ότι έχουμε άμεση επαφή μαζί τους, καλύτερη επαφή για να γνωρίζουν το δίκαιο των ενωσιακών και τους διάφορους κανονισμούς. Και έτσι έχουμε την απαραίτητη συνεργασία που απαιτείται από αυτούς. Και προσπαθούμε τώρα να απλώσουμε τέλος πάντων τις γνώσεις αυτές και στο ευρύτερο κοινό. Σας ευχαριστώ πάντως. Λοιπόν, να καλέσω τώρα εδώ να μας μιλήσει ο Marc Hoddle από τις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες της Αμερικής και συγκεκριμένα στην Καλιφόρνια. Ο Marc Hoddle είναι ειδήμονας, εξειδικεύεται στη βιολογική καταπολέμηση και εργάζεται στο τμήμα εντομολογίας του Πανεπιστημίου της Καλιφόρνιας στο Riverside. Εργάζεται στο βιολογική καταπολέμηση διαφόρων εντόμων και ιδίως όσον αφορά σε συγκεκριμένες καλλιέργειες, όσον είναι τα σπυροειδή και τα αβοκάτο. Ο Marc Hoddle έχει πτυχίο από το Πανεπιστήμιο της Auckland της Νέας Ζηλανδίας και έχει διδακτορικό στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Μασαχουσέτης στην Αμερική. Είναι μαζί μας σήμερα ακριβώς για να μας μιλήσει για τα θέματα της διαφορίνας Ήτρη και του Ταμαρίξια ραδιάτα και να τον καλέσω στο βήμα για να τον ακούσουμε. Σας ευχαριστώ.
Okay, good morning everybody. I'd like to thank Anthemis and the Ministry of Agriculture for the opportunity to visit Cyprus. It's a fantastic invitation to be able to visit with you and share the work that we have done in California. And I am hoping that the information that we can provide today will be of some help in managing this problem. So I'm going to summarize the work that we have done with the parasitoids that you've heard about this morning that has resulted in the very successful control of Asian citrus psyllid in California. This has been a 15-year project. And as you heard this morning, we are delivering the information to you and it has saved you a lot of time. And it's going to save you a lot of money too. And it may end up saving your citrus industry as well. Okay, so let's get going. California, what has happened since we began the biological control program against this pest, the Asian citrus psyllid? I'm going to be telling you a story today about 4 insects. The insect of concern is the Asian citrus psyllid. I'm going to explain to you the work that we have done with Tamarixia radiata, the parasitoid that we brought in from Pakistan. That is part of the native range of Asian citrus psyllid. That is why we went to Pakistan, was to look for the natural enemies that had evolved to attack and kill the target pest. We have problems with ants in our orchards. I have seen a lot of ants tending sap-sucking pests in your orchards. These ants protect those hemipteran pests from their natural enemies. We need to develop very effective controls against the ants if we are going to maximize the impact of our natural enemies against the target insect. And I'm going to discuss with you new technology that we have developed for ant control that may have potential for use here in Cyprus as well. And then finally, we have another ally that is helping us in the battle against Asian citrus psyllid. This is a generalist predator. It is a hoverfly, a syrphid fly. These larvae eat hundreds of psyllid nymphs, and combined with the parasitoid, Tamarixia, they have provided outstanding control of Asian citrus psyllid in California. And I'm going to explain how we have managed to make an integrated pest management program for Asian citrus psyllid with the goal of reducing our reliance on insecticides for managing this insect pest. Okay, so the life cycle is very simple. The adults have wings, they can fly. They lay their eggs on citrus flush. This is a very important part of the life cycle. If there is no flush on the citrus, there is no egg laying, and then there will be no nymphs that will develop. The nymphs are the immature stages of the psyllid. They suck the sap from the trees, and it is this sap, the white honeydew that is excreted, that the ants collect. The ants like the sugar, and in return for the sugar, they protect those psyllids from their natural enemies. And then we have the adults. So the system is quite simple. You can think of these insects as syringes. They feed on an infected plant. The nymphs and the adults carry the bacteria that causes Wong Long Bing inside their bodies, and when they feed on the citrus tree, they release the bacteria into the tree, and that is how the infection starts. So the bacteria are limited to the phloem, or the carbohydrate conducting tubes of the citrus tree, and a symptom of infection is the yellowing of the leaves and fruit that does not ripen properly. Now the fruit ripens at the beginning at the top part of the fruit. This is a strange physiological disorder. Because the fruit is ripening at the top, it causes premature fruit drop. Normally citrus fruit changes colour from the bottom of the fruit, then it comes up to the top, and when that colouring process is complete, the fruit is ripe, and then you can take it from the tree. But when it is the reverse process, the fruit drops from the tree prematurely. And then trees will die within about 5 to 8 years of being infected with the bacteria. So this is an example of fruit that have ripened improperly in Florida, and they have dropped from the tree prematurely. And this is a healthy navel orange that I bought at one of the supermarkets. You can't find good fruit in Florida anymore. They've all fallen on the ground, and they have a strange taste to them when you drink the juice. So the impact of the insect and the disease in Florida has been devastating. More than 75% of citrus production in Florida now has gone. And some professional citrus growers think that the industry may not be viable in Florida anymore. It is now very difficult to produce lots of good, cheap oranges, citrus that you can use for juice or for eating. So approximately a 75% decline in productive acreage. California has seen what has happened in Florida, and we've been very concerned now that we have the insect and the disease that our citrus industry will experience something similar. And the citrus industry in California is worth about $7 billion a year. So the economic impact could be quite devastating should we see something similar in California as what we have observed in Florida. So the Asian citrus psyllid was first found in California in 2008. 4 years later, we found the disease. This is typical, and this may be the situation you will see here in Cyprus too. You get the insect first, and then several years later, you will find the disease in the orchards. So what impact has this had in California? So I'm going to begin the story now in Punjab, Pakistan. My wife Christina and I, we spent 3 years working in this part of Asia. It is thought to be part of the native range for the Asian citrus psyllid. We were based at the University of Agriculture in Faisalabad, which is on the eastern side of the country. So we were in here, Faisalabad. There are major citrus production areas in Toba Tek Singh, Sagoda and Gujranwala. Pakistan still has a very large and productive citrus industry. Even though Asian citrus psyllid is everywhere and the disease is prevalent, that was very curious to me, and I'm going to come back to this situation towards the end of the presentation, because I think we have a story similar in California that may be similar to what we will see here in Cyprus, and it may be related largely to the climate that we have in these hot citrus growing areas. So the reason we went to Pakistan was because it's part of the native range of Asian citrus psyllid, but also because that part of the native range of the psyllid has a 70% climate match with California. The climate is very similar to California. Therefore, the parasites should be able to tolerate very hot, dry summers and cool, damp winters. Does that sound familiar to the climate here in Cyprus? One person shook their head. Is the translator doing a good job? So we would go to the orchards. Sometimes we had elite Punjabi commando units with us because we were worried about terrorists kidnapping us, trying to kill us. That was never a problem, so we didn't need those armed guards. And this is the parasitoid, very small. So it was a big challenge to find these very small insects in these citrus orchards. So the parasite lays its eggs underneath the citrus psyllid nymph. Those eggs hatch, and then the larva will feed on the underside of the psyllid nymph, and it will kill it. So this is how the natural enemy works. The larva of the parasite will eat the inside of the psyllid, killing it. And then it will pupate, similar to a butterfly, and then from that parasitized host you get a new adult parasitoid. And they emerge from the top part of the nymph, and the circular exit hole is a very good signature that that psyllid has been killed by Tamarixia. Now importantly, they can kill in a different way as well. To lay the egg, the female has an egg-laying tube which we call an ovipositor. And that is how she lays the egg underneath the psyllid nymph and attaches it to the leg of the psyllid nymph. But she can use that ovipositor as a knife, and she will stab that psyllid until it starts to bleed, and then she will drink the blood of the psyllid, and this provides the protein that she needs to develop more eggs. So Tamarixia kills in two ways: through reproduction, which results in another parasite, and she can function as a predator. This is why this parasite is so powerful. It can reproduce, and it eats psyllids too. So we spent a lot of time in quarantine doing safety testing to make sure Tamarixia would not pose an environmental problem should we release it in California. All those tests conclusively demonstrated that the parasite is very safe and poses no risk to non-target organisms. And then we began the releases of the parasite in urban areas. Similar to Cyprus, nearly every person in California has citrus in their gardens. And the Asian citrus psyllid had lots of food to feed on. So we would place the parasites in these vials, put them out in the gardens, the parasites would emerge, find the nymphs, and then parasitize them. And the parasite spread very quickly through California. There were so many psyllids for it to feed on. Wherever it landed on a citrus tree, there was food for it to feed on or to parasitize. We would go back to our release sites, and we would see hundreds of psyllids that had emergence holes in them, demonstrating that the parasite had been very successful. The genetics work, which I'm showing here, when we found the parasite in the gardens, the question was, did that parasite come from Pakistan, or had it come from some other part of the world? Had it come to California on its own? Well, the DNA work tells us quite conclusively that those parasites have a Pakistani genetic signature. We put them there, they spread, and they have provided the control of Asian citrus psyllid. So what have they done? Well, we've done several things to look at the impact, and you've seen some of these graphs before, which demonstrates the power of these parasitoids for killing psyllids. So this is a population graph. Before we released the parasite, we would count hundreds of psyllids in 1 or 2 minutes on these citrus trees. Hundreds. In comparison to cypress, you are averaging maybe 2 adults per citrus tree. We were seeing 200 to 300 psyllids on the trees before we released the parasite. And you can see those numbers here are very high and they are in blue. The magenta line here shows the parasitoid. When we released it, we saw very high levels of parasitism, but the psyllid numbers never recovered back to those very high densities that we saw before. You have seen this several times now. These parasites are very effective at controlling Asian citrus psyllid. However, there was another part of this mystery that we couldn't understand. Other things were killing citrus psyllid nymphs, but we did not know what they were because we were not in the orchards all day watching what was happening. So to understand better what was happening, we would place in the citrus orchards small trees that were infested with psyllids, and then we had these video cameras which would watch the psyllids. These cameras could film during the day and they could film during the night. Then we would analyze the video data. We had 19,200 hours of digital data to analyze. So what did we find? Well, out of all that data, we saw 647 kill events where we know definitely what the natural enemy was that was killing those psyllids. Almost 60% of them were from those fly larvae. But we'd never seen the flies. We'd never seen them do this. And the reason we did not see them was because they would only come out at night time to feed on the psyllids. And we needed the video cameras to capture those data for us. About 30% of the mortality was caused by our parasite from Pakistan. And very few events were from predatory lacewing larvae. So, our two major natural enemies are these naturally occurring predatory flies, the hoverflies, and our parasitoid from Pakistan. And about 60% of what we observed was occurring at night time. However, the other lesson that we learned from this was that this invasive ant, the Argentine ant, was always present on those psyllids, taking the sugar and then chasing our natural enemies away when the natural enemies would come to those psyllid colonies. And you can see the ants here taking the honeydew, and they take this resource back to the nest to feed the queen and the ant larvae. So we have estimated that some ant populations are so massive in California that those trees may have over 1 million ants a day going up and down them, and it makes it very difficult for the natural enemies to control those citrus pests. And this is what happens when the ants see our parasitoid from Pakistan. They will attack and kill it. We need to prevent this. If we want our natural enemies to be as effective as possible, we need to control those ants. But our hoverfly larva is strong and it will fight back against the ants. But we don't want the hoverfly larvae wasting time doing this type of behavior. We want them feeding on citrus psyllid nymphs. So how can we do better control of the ants? Ants have been controlled very effectively using water that has sugar in it and a very low concentration of insecticide. These ants love drinking sugar water, and they will poison themselves. They will come to these containers that have sugar water, they will collect it, take it back to the nest, and then they will kill the queen by feeding her the poison. So maybe in 1 or 2 days, those colonies of ants will disappear because they've all been killed. However, this approach is very expensive. You need a lot of these containers in the orchards to control the ants effectively. You have to collect them once a month, clean them, put new sugar water with insecticide in them, then put them back in the orchard. There must be a better way of using that sugar water to control those ants. So we have developed a new way of delivering that toxin to these ants. we've developed these biodegradable hydrogel beads. It's made out of alginate, the same material that you have in your ice cream. It's used in medication. It is a food-grade product. Each of those small balls has inside it the sugar water that the ants like to drink and a very, very small amount of insecticide at a concentration of 0.0001%. And the ants will drink the sugar water and they will take that back to the nest and then they will feed it. Within 2 or 3 days, those gels will biodegrade into the soil. Then in a couple of weeks, you will reapply them to the soil again, and the cycle will repeat itself until the ants have been effectively controlled. But one of the problems that we have is, where do you put the gels, and how big a problem do you have with the ants in your orchards? Nobody wants to be out counting ants. If you're going to do an integrated pest management program, one of the things that we rely on are estimates of the pest densities, and if you know how many insects are out there, then you can make a decision on whether or not you need to do some control measure. This is the basic idea of integrated pest management. You apply a treatment only when it's necessary. But how do you know how many ants you have in the orchard? Nobody wants to sit in an orchard counting ants. I have done it. It is a horrible job. We need a machine to help us do this. The ants run along the irrigation lines in California. I have not seen them do that here. There's a different species of ant that does not use the irrigation lines. But the ants, the Argentine ant, is always on the irrigation lines, running between the trees. We have made a beautiful super highway for the ants to move from tree to tree, to go up the trunk, collect all the sugar, bring it back down, run along the pipe, and then go back into the nest. We can count the ants on those pipes, and we can use a little machine that we attach to the pipe that has an infrared beam that scans across the top of the pipe. And each time the ants move through that beam, they are counted. It is like when you go into a shop and you open a door and you hear the chime go, ding dong. You know somebody has come in. This is how this machine works. So you can see the ant densities are very high, and the machine will count those ants, and then it will transmit the data to the cloud. And we have an app on our phone where we can see in real time the number of ants that are active in different parts of the orchard. We have sensors in our ant counters that can tell us the temperature and the humidity in those areas of the orchard as well. We can collect a lot of data without having to go to the orchard. It is all coming in through the cloud to our phones in real time. And you can create heat maps where you can see which parts of the orchard have a lot of ant activity, and that is where you go to put the gels. You don't want to treat the whole orchard. You treat the parts of the orchard where the ants are a problem. Okay. So, the data comes into, from the counters, comes into the gateway, which sends it to the cloud. And I think it should be possible to have a machine that will then go to those different parts of the orchard and deliver the gels underneath the trees to control the ants using GPS coordinates. A human will never need to do this work. Artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things will help us be better agricultural producers. And this is the future of food production. So the other problem we have is that our orchards are very barren. We do not have a lot of vegetation in our orchards. Those hoverfly larvae, the predators, the fly larvae, the females need flowers to get pollen and nectar. And we have been looking at planting these flowering crops in our orchards to provide food for those natural enemies, those generalist predators. Habitat diversification, we think, is important for enhancing the effectiveness of the biological control agents that live in our citrus orchards. So flowering cover crops, we have assessed those. We have demonstrated that they recruit natural enemies. They can build up the populations of natural enemies, which can apply even more pressure to Asian citrus psyllid, but also additional insect pests that are in our orchards. This is a powerful technology too. And we have been targeting these hoverflies. It is the larvae of this fly that eat the Asian citrus psyllid nymphs. So we've looked at different flowers, and we have found the best flower is this one, Alyssum. It is native to the Mediterranean, actually, and it does great in our hot, dry climates. And this is the flower that we are planting in our orchards now to encourage those flies. And the data are quite clear. When the flowers are present, the flies show up, and we get very good control of Asian citrus psyllid nymphs. Okay, so a question that I get asked a lot is, oh my God, citrus is going to go extinct in California. You have Asian citrus psyllid, you've got Wang Long Bing. It's going to be a disaster like Florida. We have had this problem now for 15, 16, 17 years. We still have very healthy citrus in California. And this is where I think our climate is going to play an important role. Florida has a subtropical climate, and the average temperatures are perfect for Asian citrus psyllid and Huang Long Bing. Cyprus, like California, has very hot summers and cold winters. The insect and the disease-causing bacteria, Candidatus liberibacter asiaticus, do not like those temperature extremes. And I think this is going to be very helpful for us as we manage this problem. So, here are some data. Different temperatures. You can see different colours here on the map. So there are parts of the year where it is too cold for the Asian citrus psyllids to develop in California. And then there are parts of the year where it is just too hot for them to develop. Like Cyprus, we get days that are 40, 45, sometimes almost 50 degrees Celsius. These temperatures are not good for the insect, and they are not good for the bacteria that causes Huang Long Bing. Sometimes it gets so hot where I live in Riverside. Things die. But why does this happen? These data are from a plant epidemiologist up at UC Davis. And you can see here some strange looking shapes. But what's really important here is that these red dots indicate the average amount of bacteria that causes Huang Long Bing that are inside the citrus trees in California. And when you can compare that to the levels that you see in Florida where trees are dying, the average amount of bacteria that we are seeing is much lower than what we see in Florida. So our trees can get the bacteria, but the levels of bacteria probably do not reach levels that are sufficiently high enough to kill the plants. And I think in part this is because of the hot summer temperatures that sterilize these plants over summer. We have data from Pakistan where it is horrendously hot over summer. You get multiple days where it's 50 degrees Celsius where we were working. It's so hot it kills the mosquitoes that are living in your room, which I had never seen before. I didn't think that was possible, but it happens. And when it gets that hot, the bacteria moves back down into the roots of the tree, and then there is no bacteria in the tree for the psyllids to take. And we see something similar too for the amount of bacteria that are inside the psyllids. You can see in California the average level of bacteria in the psyllids is low in comparison to what you see in Florida. So we have low titers of bacteria in the trees, and we have low titers of bacteria inside the psyllids. And I think the temperature profiles are responsible for this. California was the first Mediterranean climate to be invaded by the psyllid and the disease, and we have not had an HLB epidemic yet. We now have a major, very interesting natural field experiment happening. We have psyllids in Israel, Lebanon. We have the psyllid here in Cyprus. These are all Mediterranean climates. You can look at these data and think of them as an hypothesis. If what I am saying is correct, then we should expect to see similar levels of bacteria when it shows up here in these Mediterranean climates. That is not to say it's not going to be a problem and needs management. Of course it will. But what I am suggesting is that the psyllid and the disease may not be as severe as what we have seen in Florida and in Brazil. Okay, I hope that is clear. So some take-home messages. The biological control program has reduced psyllid numbers by more than 75% in California. In some areas now, similar to the data that Alberto showed, we can no longer find Asian citrus psyllid. It has gone. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of psyllids living on our citrus trees anymore. We have had no HLB outbreaks. The California Department of Food and Agriculture has removed maybe about 8,000 infected trees now from people's gardens. That's a fraction of 1% of all the citrus that's in California. But none of those trees died from Huanglongbing. They tested positive and they were removed. We all have bacteria in our body that can kill us, but they don't reach levels that will cause mortality. And that's maybe what we're seeing in Florida, in California now. Trees have the bacteria that causes the disease, but it cannot build to sufficient levels to make the trees sick and to kill them. So I suggest that the biological control program, because it has reduced psyllid numbers to such low levels, has been responsible for a lack of an HLB outbreak. There are too few insects now to find enough bacteria to keep moving it through the environment. This is what the whole program is about, reducing the densities of the insects that can acquire the bacteria and then spread it to new trees. Biological control can reduce those pest densities. Insecticide applications have the same goal, to reduce vector densities to low levels so that the rate of disease transmission has been lowered. And we can achieve that with our natural enemies. And finally, I would argue that the biological control program has achieved far greater levels of control over much greater areas than was ever possible with the insecticide programs that were being run by the USDA and CDFA. And consequently, because there are such low densities of these vectors out here, only about 8,000 trees so far have been identified with Huanglongbing and have been removed from the public environment, from public areas. And I am right on time. There we go. Thank you.
Ευχαριστήσουμε τον Μάρκ για μια εξαιρετική παρουσίαση, πολύ ενδιαφέρον αυτά που έχουμε ακούσει σήμερα.